season has been brought to you by Radisson Red, Johannesburg, Rosebank. Style you can bank on. Great day, everyone. Ed Dudley, Durham, North Carolina, in the United States. I'm still here. Hopefully, we'll take a trip real soon and I'll record from maybe the beach or the mountains. But until then, sitting in my house. But I get to spend time with my amazing girlfriend, my only girlfriend. You already know the story if you've been tuning in. I'm not her only boyfriend. Sad about that, but the beautiful Charmaine Super Money. How are you today?
I am fabulous, my Zulu Ed. And yes, you are my only boyfriend in the US. In the United States. Hello, everyone. Coming to you from Johannesburg, South Africa. I'm extra excited today because I tell you why. Because we have another dynamic woman in the house. Mm-hmm. So Ed can stop teasing me about my many boyfriends. And I could start teasing him about his additional girlfriend. How's that for a start, Mr. Dudley?
Interesting. So I'm going to start collecting girlfriends like you collect boyfriends?
But that's what makes the world go round, right? The more we connect with amazing people, the more we'd be able to make the changes that we need to. Don't you agree?
I totally agree. And I too am excited about this conversation. It's a conversation that many people shy away from. I honestly did not learn about what we're going to dive into probably to about, as far as deep, about 5 years ago when I joined a board of an organization and then started learning the figures, the numbers. It's astounding. But I'm just glad to have our guest in today to just share her story, her journey. And what I'm really feeling good about, it is like a 12-hour difference. So I'm in the United States. It's like 8 o'clock here. Charmaine's in South Africa is around 2 o'clock, around there.
2 p.m.
She's in Hong Kong, so it's at night. She decided to jump on with us. So let's just bring her in and get the conversation started. Miss Sylvia Yu Friedman, how are you today?
Hi, I'm doing great. Excited to be here. It's a real pleasure to speak with a duo that's one in South Africa and one in America. I mean, I've been to South Africa before. You know, I left my heart there in Cape Town.
Aww.
Gorgeous, gorgeous. And you're in Raleigh? Oh no, you're in Durham.
Yeah.
That's where, we have family there, and Matt's sons are in Raleigh. So it's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us in the Ubuntu house, Sylvia. I mean, you are beautiful, I have to say, inside and out, multi-talented, journalist, author, humanitarian, making a difference in so many ways. I'm not going to start with your book, though. I want to actually start, if we may, from your early days, having been born in Korea, and your travels, and what ignited or what planted the seed of journalism.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I don't know. I guess I stumbled upon journalism. I thought I would go into human rights law, and like all people who study arts in university, I mean, what else is there to do except, you go into education or law or journalism or architecture or do your master's, and then suddenly I applied to a job at a TV station. One day I saw the ad and I just felt compelled to apply and go for it. And the rest is history. And then it just made sense. It just made sense. And I had several people tell me when I was in university, they said, "Oh, Sylvia, I could totally see you, talking about the news on TV. I think you should do something like that." And I was thinking, really? And I was lost. I didn't have any mentors who could guide me in the area of my career. And that's why I'm writing a book for young people on, it's a how-to, it's like a mentoring book or a coaching book. And I want to talk about how I found my calling, how to find a spouse. I learned the rough way. I have an ex, I went through a bad divorce, and I'm now very happily married. So I want to share, all my foibles, all my mistakes, so that, it will help at least one person, right?
Oh, that is so powerful. Why let somebody else go through the mistakes you've been if you can actually just share your story? It's very difficult to share stories, though, but you do it beautifully. I have to say, with so much passion, compassion, and and so authentically. So, Sylvia.
Thank you. It's not easy to, bear the ugly side of yourself, so to speak, or the shadow side, but there's something very liberating about it. And I want to encourage people to do it, because it takes the sting out of it. It really, it conquers the shame. If there's something that is an embarrassing or humiliating story or event in your life, and you share it publicly, like, really, it's very liberating, and it helps you overcome, and it crystallizes, the lesson learned. So that's what I hope to do, either on my LinkedIn posts. I just want to be very honest. And even in my talks, I give a lot of book talks and speeches and interviews. I try to be as authentic as can be. And I challenge myself each time. And there's, in the beginning, when I first started to do this, there was a lot of agony and, I feel so exposed, but I'm so glad to do it, because people can identify with you then, right? And that's what it's all about. It's about the power of connection, especially now we have more tools, than any other time. I grew up with a pager and what do you call it? The phone where you have to dial around,
the rotary dial phone.
I had a typewriter in my first year of college, and I didn't grow up with the internet.
Yep.
So, now it's just so ironic. We have more communication tools, more ways of reaching out and calling someone. And we don't really call each other anymore. We text each other, and yet, people are isolated, and they're lonely, and they're busy. And I think the pandemic magnified that. It magnified the loneliness, the isolation. And that's the dark side of independence, right? Sorry, Ed, the United States is all about being independent, but the shadow side is, you're alone, and you can't, at the end of the day, if you're chasing the American dream and trying to, go up the ladder, you can't hug your work documents. Your promotion isn't going to, be there for you when one ends up in the hospital, right?
It's such a powerful statement that you're making, Sylvia. Please go ahead. I just needed to emphasize.
I mean, the pandemic has been so brutal, but to circle back to your question, I would say it was like a God-led revelation or journey for me to go into journalism, because I thought I would be a human rights lawyer, and I'm so glad I'm not. I mean, not to knock lawyers, but I'm not a detailed person. Like, I'm not anal retentive, and I can't really be bothered with like the tiniest details. And I love connecting with people, and through journalism, I've been able to meet like some of the worst scum of the world to the greats in life, right? And I'm so grateful for that, because that's what changed and transformed me, and that's what I wrote about in my latest book, A Long Road to Justice.
Speak more about it. Your latest book. Go ahead. Tell us more.
Oh, okay. Well, I talk about, my early days as well. It's about my life journey over the last 20 years. And you know, when I first started, or even before I began to think about moving to Asia. So yeah, I guess it encapsulates from the year 2000, and just my journey of finding myself, my identity. I explore racism, the racial discrimination I experienced in an all Caucasian neighborhood, and you know, feeling like I wasn't affirmed. You know, in the media, there were no authority figures, teachers, politicians, you know, media images, TV, movie characters who reflected what I looked like. And so I grew up feeling very, you know, ugly, and feeling like I should be looking like this blonde-haired, blue-eyed classmate, or the brunette, and just experiencing the humiliation of racial discrimination. It was an entry point into the justice work that I'm doing now, because it's the utter injustice of being treated, you know, like crap, just because I look a certain way, or I eat different food, or I can speak a second language at home. You know, I can't even think of another like a personal injustice that is on that same level. You know,
where was it that you grew up?
I grew up in a suburb of Vancouver, Canada, in the 1980s. So now Vancouver is like 50% Asian, and there's now like a backlash towards mainland Chinese who are coming in and buying up all the property. But back when I was growing up, it was, you know, multiculturalism wasn't that, you know, it was still pretty Caucasian dominant. And you know, I had a hard time with those early experiences, because I'm a sensitive person, and to be called a chink, and to be, you know, just have all kinds of aggression, even from older people, my God. And that's what makes me, to this day, a very strong advocate for racial justice. And I hate racism. It makes my blood boil. And I write about racism in East Asia, because during World War II, it was the Japanese military that was racially motivated, and they saw themselves as superior. And I mean, I'll go into this a little bit later, but you know, the wounds of racial discrimination, you know, it's still there. You know, Japan is very much a discriminatory society, right? And anyways, I don't want to go too much into that.
You've said so many things and you're not alone, Sylvia. There's more people that actually need to hear this. I mean, growing up in apartheid South Africa, racism was rife until recently. So I can relate and connect to some of the things that you're saying. I do want to say, though, I'm sorry you had to go through that. But in a way, our childhood experience determine whether we become better human beings and put more good into the world, or bitter human beings. We just do what was done unto us. And I'm glad you chose to be better.
Thank you.
And I'm, in a strange way, Sylvia, what you went through has actually shaped who you've become, and the impact that you're having on so many lives. Had you not gone through it, you know, it would have been a very different journey you would have gone through. I mean, Mr. can speak about racism as well, coming from the independent US.
Yes,
Mr. Dudley.
what do you have to say?
So when you were talking about growing up in an all Caucasian neighborhood, I remember there was a time that my family lived in an all Caucasian neighborhood, basically.
Yeah.
And I rode the bus to school, and I was the only person of color on the bus. And there was one young man that used a racial slur against me. I got home, I told my parents, and my parents were working class. They just, you know, taking care of family. And they were like, don't get kicked off that bus. So I sucked it up for a whole year, school year, this little boy's taunts and things like that on the bus, until the last day of school. And the bad thing is his last name was Newton. I don't remember his first name. The last day of school on the bus. Unfortunately, I do not condone violence, but I unleashed a hell fury on him, and then got off the bus. Got home, told my parents, I said, I'm not going to get kicked off the bus because I'm not going to the school again. So I don't think he will say that again. But it's ugly. It's nasty.
It is.
You know, it is. It's just sad, and it bothers me to my core because
Yes, me too.
I really understand. It's just like we're all human.
Yes.
We all bleed. We just come in different shapes, colors, and sizes. That's
Yeah.
it. We all go through the same things in life too.
Yeah. And where do the kids learn it? They learn it from their parents.
They learn
At
from
Right?
home.
Yeah, exactly.
No kid is born racist.
Yeah.
No kid is born hating.
Yeah.
18.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And that's why I made a trip to South Africa to research or to, see for myself the effects of the dismantling of the apartheid. And what someone said really stood out, that, you can't change hearts through law, right? Through the laws, through the changing of legislation. And that stayed with me. And that's what I wanted to do more of, touch hearts. And I felt like, and later in life, I was involved in more like racial reconciliation work and challenging people in releasing their hatred, their generational pain, resentment, hatred towards the Japanese for historical wounds. And I realized it has to be motivated by love. And sometimes I don't have it. Like the other day, I gave a presentation on, military or wartime sex slavery that enslaved Koreans, Chinese, and everyone across the Asia Pacific by the Japanese imperial military. And it was sanctioned and supported by the Japanese government. And, I'm telling the story, my usual story, but this audience, what was different about it, there were Japanese students, young people in the audience, because it was a China-Japan conference, and they were trying to build and foster more understanding between those two people groups. And I had a young Japanese woman challenge me and say, well, what about this? Like, it was just too politically correct, which I'm kind of tired of. Like I'm I need to be careful, but she was picking apart, well, you said racism, do you really mean ethnic discrimination? And I was like, I'm not having it. And I just said,
there's
what?
A bigger issue here.
Yeah,
Can we focus on the bigger
exactly.
Yeah.
But I just felt something from that young woman. Racism is something you can sense, even if you can't pinpoint it. I could just feel something from this young woman, and I just shut her down. Like I said, in a nice way, okay, let's, we need to hear from this other person too. And sorry, I don't know, I can't remember how I addressed it, but I realized I need more love. Like if I'm going to deal with these sensitive issues that are rooted in racial discrimination in East Asia and between Japanese, Koreans, and Chinese, I have to be filled with more patience, more love. Because at the end of the day, isn't that what Martin Luther King advocated? That it's hate is not going to drive out hate. Only love can do that. And I'm not there yet, but I think I'm, I want to keep going. And
it's a journey.
You're on the right journey, actually. Do you know what I'm saying?
You.
You have love, you have wisdom.
You.
And you're doing what needs to be done in the world. Because let's be honest, the issue you're talking about, comfort women, not everybody would have known about it to the extent that we do if it wasn't, I believe, to Sylvia Yu Friedman telling the story and doing her research. Let's be honest, I wouldn't have. I mean, you made that possible for. Talk a little bit about that, Sylvia, and how you felt when you first heard about this, and what drove you to do. You've done like hundreds of documentaries, right?
Before you go there, for the people in the States that may not know, can you share with them a little bit what the term comfort women means?
Yes. Okay, and I'll share about my presentation in Macon, Georgia, by the way, where the audience came up to me and said I was telling a parable of African American and white relations through what I was sharing, my presentation on Japanese military sex slavery, or historical, wartime sex slavery, and the generational pain that resulted. This issue is something that I've wanted to stop, because it's depressing. I mean, who wants to read about young girls as young as 11 and 12 being raped by up to 60 Japanese soldiers a day? And so wherever the Japanese military went across the Pacific, they set up these comfort stations, these wartime brothels, or some activists call them rape camps, right? Because some of these rape camps had lineups of Japanese soldiers with their pants down, many of them, ready to, use the women. And they called them, public toilets, because they would just go in, use the women. And so, this is wartime, and, these men are probably terrified, anxious, and people do awful things. Like the best of people comes out, and the worst in times of war. And that's why, ever since I was in high school, I was fascinated by World War I and World War II. And so my mom was the one who read a newspaper article about the first military sex slavery survivor to come forward. And for 50 years since the war ended, World War II ended, they were silent. And so my mom told me in 1991 about these women, and there were up to 400,000 girls and women of all ethnicities: Korean, Chinese, Dutch women, Indonesian Dutch women, because Indonesia was a Dutch colony at that time. So they were blonde-haired, blue-eyed. And when people find out, they're like, really? And they violated a convention that you can't rape prisoners of war. You can't force them into labor or anything like that. And anyway, so the system, it was like a sex trafficking system. And it was run by the Japanese military, approved by the Japanese government. There were condoms that were distributed en masse, tickets for these wartime brothels or comfort stations that were distributed, that were racially discriminatory, by their very nature. And the most expensive tickets went to Japanese women. There were, they were a minority, but there were Japanese women in prostitution. They were the most expensive. Then it was the Koreans, Chinese, and then the darker skinned women were the cheapest tickets. And it's just so deplorable. And so this system, so there were 1,000 of these military brothels in mainland China alone, to just give you the scale. So every time they would go to some new camp, somewhere new, they would quickly make a wooden, comfort station. And one of the former prime ministers, Nakasone, he, in his memoir, actually wrote about how proud he was of building this one wooden comfort station.
Really?
And he
serious?
he did such a great job of building this. And so, I mean, I want to keep going, but I don't want to sound like I don't want to have edge when I'm talking about this. So I will keep going. So there were up to 400,000 of these girls, women, who were in military sex slavery, and their sole role was to comfort the Japanese soldiers on the front lines, hence the awful euphemism, comfort women. And I don't like using that term, but then people don't really recognize Japanese military sex slavery, so I have to use comfort woman. It's, it's just an easy recognition. And then, but it is an awful, awful term. And
it's still just awful listening to it, even though it was years ago. It just brings upon a terrible feeling as a woman to think what those women went through. And
exactly,
it's discrimination at another level, actually.
It's so wherever I've gone and I've shared, every woman can understand, every woman can relate. And what made it really egregious is that these survivors, or the only the strongest of the strong could survive, being systemically raped by up to 50, 60 Japanese soldiers a day, right? And they were injected, most of them, with something called 606, which sterilized them.
Oh, no.
And yeah, and there were reports, two very landmark UN reports, one by a very famous civil rights lawyer named Gay McDougall, who later advised Nelson Mandela, right? Gay McDougall. So her landmark report, which is what there was one by her and one by Kuama Swami. And I think hers was first, or was Gay McDougall's. Anyways, these are two landmark reports. And so my mom told me when I was turning 16 in high school, and I just felt, wow, this is so shocking, because it feels like this suffering, the mass suffering of Asian women, was whitewashed out of my Eurocentric history textbooks. And I didn't understand.
They don't teach you this, right?
Yeah, I didn't understand that my textbooks were European based.
Yeah.
And it just felt, it was just such a shocker. And I remember, when I was whitewashing my identity, I didn't feel Korean. But when I learned about this, I remember thinking very distinctly, wow, she was my age. The woman who came forward, and she was 68 at that time, 50 years after she was enslaved sexually by the Japanese military. She came forward and she said she was 16 when she was taken, and she was, forcibly raped, forced into prostitution. And her case was a little bit, there was an added layer, because she had a stepfather who I think kind of led her into that, right? Out of, for money and all that. And, but still, like she suffered. It cost her life. And I remember thinking, wow, that could have been me had I been born at that time. Had I been born into this poor family, because they preyed on impoverished families who were powerless. And it was just such a watershed kind of moment for me, because I realized, wow, I'm Korean in my DNA. Even though I'm trying to be white, and I stopped speaking Korean, and I just thought I'm a Korean person trapped, or I'm a white person trapped in a Korean body. Just really trying to fit in. And that was how I dealt with my pain, the humiliation of being racially discriminated against. And then learning about this issue, which is the equivalent, although I'm not saying it's the same scale as the Holocaust, but it happened at the same period as the Holocaust. It's a war crime.
Pain is pain.
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
That's irrespective as to what's the magnitude or which, it's just ridiculous. So you can't compare it. Let's be honest.
Exactly. And I'll just quickly wrap up here, because I think I'm going on and on. But basically, it was just, and I learned about this, and I remember thinking, oh man, I wish I could fight the Japanese government. And then when it ended up happening is that all these international lawsuits were launched, and Gay McDougall. So I learned about it when I was turning 16. And then this issue resurfaced in my life when I was a junior reporter. And that's how I connected with Gay McDougall by phone. And I interviewed her in her off when she was in DC, I think at the time. She wasn't at the UN, but she's still involved on this issue. And she's called on the Japanese government to address their racism within their country. And she's linked racial discrimination and this issue, in the report very clearly. And she told me by phone. And she also said something that was very shocking to me at the time, because I'm young and I was naive at the time. She told me by phone, the Japanese government spent a lot of time and money trying to cover up her report.
I'm not surprised.
On Japanese military sex slavery. And so, and partly because it's a bad PR look for them, and they haven't taken full legal and moral responsibility. And so the wounds of history have not been closed. But and usually there's a whole group of right-wing people in Japan who are like neo-Nazis, and they believe that these women who are victimized, who are sex slaves, military sex slaves, they believe they were voluntary prostitutes. They believe the ones who are involved in the lawsuits are in it for the money. And it's a real shocker, but they haven't come after me. And I wonder if it's because I'm also very big on, in my book, I want to be balanced. I'm big on, let's release the hatred and any generational pain. Let's not hold on to bitterness or resentment. Let's bring closure to the past. But the Japanese government has to apologize. And so I wrote about a Japanese reconciliation team from Japan, and they paid for their own way, traveled to mainland China, apologized to elderly survivors of wartime sex slavery, the comfort women survivors and their family. And they were so humble. They were full of love. They said verbal apologies. They said, this can't, this is from us. We're not related to any Japanese soldiers who raped women. And this is not, a replacement for the government, sincere apology, healing apology from the government of Japan. And they like, one of them held up a poem, like written in beautiful Chinese calligraphy. And sometimes they would stand out in public and there would be Chinese people walking by. They would read it and start weeping. Random strangers. So it's really, it's a sensitive topic. It's a topic that has a lot of people fired up, especially in mainland China, and the older people in Korea. Anyway, go ahead.
You've met a few of those survivors, haven't you?
Yes.
How did you feel? I mean,
yeah.
I want to say thank you at this stage for the work that you've done in uncovering and exposing all of this. And the point that you've made about healing, an apology needs to come voluntarily. You can actually feel when it's sincere. Waiting for the Japanese government to do it or asking them to do it is a waste of time. I don't believe it's going to really happen in my lifetime, because if they paid as much money to cover it up, why would they actually come out and even take accountability? But that's people for you.
Exactly.
Sylvia, I know you met some of these women that went through this traumatic experience. What was your learnings from it, and how did they process or heal or move forward, if they did?
Yeah, wow. Yeah, no, it was very life-changing to meet them, because they were still traumatized even after 50, 60, 70 years. And in the whole anti-trafficking movement, it's important, and not a lot of people are doing this, but it's important to learn from these women, because they've lived through, people are working with survivors now, but these women have been survivors for so long, and I saw their PTSD, and I've experienced secondary PTSD talking with them, because I didn't have boundaries in the early days. I was just very naive, and I thought, I want to feel with them because I need to, write with power, and it was very life-changing, because they reminded me of the Holocaust survivor that I met and heard from, when I was in high school. It was just like I was in awe, and I felt such a reverence. And that's how I approached them. I just felt so much honor for them, and they have such profound stories that I felt needed to be written for the next generation. And that was that drove me, that I don't want these women, these marginalized women, to be forgotten. And the next generation must learn, and we must learn from the wounds of history, or history will repeat again. Sorry, Charmaine, go ahead.
No, it's fine. The point I was making is, I'm sure they were so grateful to you for making time and spending time with them to hear their stories. Because sometimes when we speak it is a little bit, it starts the process of healing somewhat, because you're giving them permission and space and to be able to take the stories out. And I've just been dominating. I'm sure you have questions. Sorry.
Oh, I got it. Okay,
to
place.
Okay,
sorry. Yeah.
Charmaine, I want to just quickly respond that you're right. And that's such a great observation. These women were kind of like celebrities, where people just wanted to spend time with them. And so at a certain point, they felt like animals in a zoo. And they were tired because they were advocating. And every Wednesday in Korea, at least, they would go out into a public area right in front of the Japanese embassy and do their advocacy, right? Do their, like, hey, give us an apology. And I remember giving a speech there. And they were tired at times. And but you're right. I think it was healing to be acknowledged by people, and even many great-hearted Japanese people would go and even lived at one of the shelters for these elderly survivors. And they would cry and say, I was so sorry, and never again. But anyway, Ed, go ahead. You have a question.
I do want to make a point, though. Sorry, Ed, my boyfriend. Forgive me, Zulu.
Sorry,
Ed,
before you over talking me, what I say? No, sorry.
The point I want to make, Sylvia, is the fact that in every nation, there's good and there's bad. The fact that some of these Japanese went to mainland China to apologize, and these others went and lived in the shelter. So we must refrain from just going, those South Africans, they're pathetic. You know what I'm saying? Because we tend to do that. Or this country is what? There's good and bad in all of us, actually. So my point...
Yeah, no, and I agree. And my best friend, when I found out about what happened to, about the comfort, the wartime sex slavery, my best friend at the time was Japanese Canadian. So, I had no, what's the word? Overall hatred. It was more like I felt a generational something, Yeah, Ed, go ahead.
Which is normal.
Yes.
Journalist in Sylvia's coming out. Go ahead, Ed. Ask me my question.
I'm not going to do what I would normally do, where I said I'm just used to two women just talking to me sitting there, married. So I won't go there. But Sylvia, you said something earlier that resonated with me and triggered some thoughts. You were said trying to be white. So I've had this conversation with some other ethnicities about trying to be white. Like I've been told earlier on that I sound white, I act white.
I was just thinking that actually.
So I sound white, I act white, and I even had some individuals at one point in time said, I wouldn't be shocked if you married a white woman. So
no, he didn't. She's very light skinned. She's very light skinned.
But what was that like, feeling like that? And then when did you come to realization, I need to be me. I need to really represent my culture, my heritage, and who I am.
Yeah. Well, I don't feel like I'm at the point where I'm like, I'm going to represent my culture, but I've come in the last 4 or 5 years, I've come to really appreciate being Korean and, or maybe it's been a little bit longer than that. And, wanting to be white. I mean, I guess I did it unconsciously, subconsciously, where but I also exulted in the fact that I was very, what's the word? A lot of the kids I grew up with, the Korean kids, they would hang out with other Korean immigrant kids. But I hung out with Singaporean friends, Chinese, white people. Like I just prided myself in being able to mingle with everyone, and that I wasn't so Korean and I wasn't so like in the box. Mm-hmm. And I think it was subconscious where I just, it was like I didn't realize that I was rejecting my culture so much, even though I was doing it blatantly. Mm-hmm. And I stopped speaking Korean with my parents at home. At 12, I asked them never to call me by my Korean name. And but I would still talk, laugh, in Korean with some Korean exchange students. So there wasn't like animosity, but maybe I felt subconsciously that in order to fit in at work, that I needed to act a certain way and speak a certain way, right? And so yeah, maybe that was it. And if the Korean media is very popular. Had it been so when I was growing up, I probably would have had this identity acceptance a lot earlier. And believe it or not, at one point, because I was so into hip hop dancing, I was like, and I did braids in my hair a little bit, and I was like, I wanted to be African American, and I was like so lost in my identity, really. And then even when I went to China, mainland China, I'm like, oh, I'm mainland Chinese, and then yeah, it wasn't until 6-7 years ago where I'm like, I am Korean, and I'm very thankful to be Korean, and I made peace with it. But it's the trauma of racism. It is long lasting, and that's what it was. I experienced, and I went through traumatic events, experiences of being racially discriminated against, and I think that so many people go through it. And I wrote a LinkedIn post about, I'm wearing my Korean dress, and I was the kid who was called a chink, and I wrote, a short thing about I've really come to embrace who I am. And I had like thousands of messages come in from people who said, me too, even Caucasian people, even people who looked Caucasian but were Cypriots or Italian or Greek or, and they said, yeah, I went through this, and I was so shocked that they all understood. Yeah.
It's so powerful when you are the recipient of messages, when you realize you were not the only one. Yes. It happens all over the world at different levels and degrees.
Absolutely.
Okay, to both the white people in the room, can we just I'm not going to explain myself, but there's a reason I wear my hair the way I do, Sylvia. And for another day, I'll actually explain the story to that. Sylvia, you've done like hundreds of documentaries, right? And you've written like loads and loads of interesting, inspiring stuff. I want you to please chat to me or tell us as to what inspired the slave grooms of Hong Kong.
Oh, sure.
What's that about? And what inspired it, and your journey through that?
Sure. Well, I wrote about, and I made a film about, before I get into the slave rooms, I wrote about him and exposed and made a film. Oh, I shouldn't say exposed, but I told the story. I told a story of an ex-trafficker who became a friend from India. And then around the same time, I was digging and investigating, and someone who works in the community, in the Indian or the South Asian community in Hong Kong, gave me a tip and said, there are all these, South Asian men who are being trafficked into Hong Kong through sham marriages, and then they're forced to work as like indentured servants, and all their money is taken away. They don't have a debit card, their passports are taken away, they're abused by the brother-in-law or the father-in-law, and even the wife. And they're usually from very poor families, so they don't have any power. There's a power differential, and they don't have the power to fight back. And on top of that, so my friend Kaushik, the ex-trafficker, he affirmed that. He said, yes, I've also heard of this, right? And I felt very good about being able to, expose this, right? Sure. Because I had someone I trusted who heard firsthand from victims, and he's helped, these victims, as did the amazing immigration consultant, the South Asian man who was helping these other South Asian men who were in this predicament. And the reason why, and this has been going on for years, and there have been cases of slave brides, which is more well known.
Yeah.
But why this was undercover, and it was similar to the Japanese wartime sex slaves, the comfort woman issue. Shame is what kept the victims silent, right? It was shame, because South Asian culture is, from what I'm told, very patriarchal, and these men were very proud, and they didn't want to admit that their wives, and their wife's family was exploiting them. And they didn't have a term. They didn't think about slavery. They just knew it was unjust. They knew it was wrong. And so I exposed this, and met with one survivor in particular who, my heart went out to him, because he had parents he had to support back in Pakistan. And then, I told his story, and he was also in my short film. And he did end up in a happy marriage, actually. After he escaped, he found someone, and I don't know what happened to him, but the other twist to this story is, after it came out in the newspaper, I had one very prominent person from another particular community, actually with the Nepalese community, and he blasted me and said there is no such thing, and he CC'd the chief editor and the other editor who commissioned this. And I just thought, wow, it's so sad that sometimes the opposition and the barriers are from within the community, and that's very common. But I just thought, wow, he doesn't know me, he doesn't know the issue, and he was so staunchly convinced that there was no such thing as slave grooms from South Asia, and I was wrong, to write this story. And I should dig it up somewhere. It was really mind-boggling to hear this kind of he didn't have to. I guess I touched on a nerve, perhaps, right?
You hit a nerve.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear the story. I mean, you said you had an ex-trafficker that's a friend of yours. I'd love to hear the story, what made him go from being a trafficker and then your friend now.
Sure. And to wrap up with the slave grooms, I really strongly believe that we need to support more men who are exploited, because they can form their families. They can marry, have kids, and fighting trafficking includes fighting for families, right?
Absolutely.
Because when you're enslaved and exploited, you're not able to have normal dating or married life and have kids of your own. And it's very much, just like the transatlantic slavery, when they were separating families. And that's what I noticed, that these women, and the success stories are when the survivors are able to trust a man enough and get married and have kids. I just find that so beautiful. It's so redemptive. And with my this ex pimp, he was.
I like the way you say this ex-pimp. I've been hanging around with this pimp.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, he doesn't like me calling him ex-trafficker anymore.
But it
so
is.
He said, you can call me ex-pimp. I'm like, okay, what's better, pimp or trafficker? So his name is Kaushik, and he was in some of the most notorious red light area in Mumbai, the notorious Mumbai brothels. And he escaped. He could, because it was the women in the brothels who were threatened, right? And the men, I guess he knew it was dangerous and that he had to flee the country. So he flew to Thailand first, and his background was as a cook. So he worked in a hotel, and then he moved to Hong Kong, and then he was just so lonely and really empty inside. He walked by a church, and it's kind of a mystical, miraculous story. It's an Anglican church, and then he formed friendships with the people who attended that church, who were so kind to him, looked out for him, and he had a very powerful spiritual experience with Jesus Christ, and he became a Christian. He converted, and he was a Hindu, and then he converted to Christianity. And believe it or not, he is a Christian missionary in the Philippines, and he married a lovely Filipina lady. They have 2 kids of their own, and they adopted 2 additional kids of his wife's sister. His wife's sister was in a really bad state. And he is, he's just the kindest, most gentle guy. And Matt, my husband, and I were, we love talking with him because he knows so much about trafficking. Like the real experts, we say, are the survivors and the traffickers. They really know what's going on. And I've gone out with Kaushik to some dodgy places, and he's like, 3 o'clock, there's a sex trafficking victim there. She's from this and that, and it's like very fascinating to hear his depth of knowledge. And I'm like, man, I wish the police would pick you up and just take all your knowledge and do something about it. But and I produced a film on him, and his story is in my latest book, A Long Road to Justice. And he's just an inspiring guy.
All your films, actually, because besides being knowledgeable and being aware, it just opens up your mind as to how and what actually happens out there and what we can actually do to help. The one thing I do want to speak about, or just draw attention to, is the fact that you said he experienced kindness in this church. That kind of helped him shift and see the fact that he was appreciated irrespective of where he's come from. And that's what people need to, and we all have the ability to change, to move forward. And if we pour more love and kindness into the world and not label people for what they've done, maybe we'll be able to have a more positive shift into the world. And he's testament to that, actually.
Yes, so beautifully said. I think we just need more kindness. The political correctness, I think, is very harsh, right? And it's and the whole cancel culture. I mean, this is not what I grew up with. Like I remember playing outside when I was growing up as a kid, and I mean, it was a gentler climate, right? Like I grew up in a gentler time, and now people are extra careful of what they say and what they call people, and yes, it's good to be mindful, but I hope it doesn't become toxic, right?
Oh yeah.
Anyway.
I love it. One comment, my boyfriend, and then I'm going to keep quiet. I love the way this conversation flowed, though. We didn't choose our words. You used pimp. You said I wanted to be like a white person. Dirty. It was about being authentic.
You called us two white people.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You called us two white people. You called us two white people.
There were 2 white people in the house. I'm just recognizing that. Sylvia, you and your hubby, I'm in love with both of you. Let me just put it out there. So is Ed.
Thank you.
I mean, your journey has taken you all through this incredible experience. And in the process, you are touching so many lives positively. I mean, your communication skills, you do documentaries, write books and all of that. Talk to me about what you guys are currently doing and how you're changing the world.
Oh, gosh. We hope for more impact. Sometimes you just never know. We don't have any clue as to.
I can assure you are having impact.
Oh, well, thank you, both of you. You're so kind. And we will go on a speaking tour this September, October. in Canada and the eastern part of the US. And I can't remember if we're in Raleigh, but would love to see Ed if
I will come find you guys.
yeah, that would be lovely.
Don't be
And
jealous, Charmaine.
yeah, and then
Yes.
we'll have to go to South Africa.
Yes,
Charmaine.
you have to come. You have to come again.
Yeah, we would love to. And then I am working on some other film, a film project, and Matt is also has a film project on the go. Matt has a movie on sex trafficking in America that is, moving forward, and I have a TV series based on my book, A Long Road to Justice, that is
nice.
in pre-development. So it's still in the early stages of script writing even. And then what else? We walk with people. We want to spend more time with young people because we believe in the next generation, in investing in young people. And we
talk about
go ahead. So sorry.
Be the hero, be the change. Tell me more.
Sure. Yeah. Be the hero, be the change is our dream of mobilizing at least 100,000 volunteers, hopefully millions of people, to do at least one act of kindness, one action to help somebody, or to raise awareness about bullying or the environment, or that plastic use needs to be curbed, or dementia, or whatever it is, like something to help make this world a better place, which is how I would describe my calling. Even though I'm doing media and communications, I'm a mobilizer, and I hope to raise awareness about important issues, human rights issues, untold stories, and so that they won't be forgotten. And I mobilize money, not so much recently, but I'll always be involved in philanthropy, in directing funding, because I'm really big on not just carelessly giving away to the big global organizations. They have too much overhead, and I'm very much into choose wisely. And it's I don't support the big global ones. Yeah, so that's what we're doing. And I'm ghost writing a book for this very fascinating therapist. I would love to have her on your show. I'll send you the details later. So I'm ghost writing a book, and then I'm writing a book for young people. It's the book that I wanted to read when I was in my senior year in high school, or in my 20s, about finding your calling, how to find your spouse, how do you, be a light in the marketplace. How do you, so I'm writing about my stories, and also collecting people's stories. So I can ask both of you, I'll email you later when I get to that point, and ask, well, how did you find your calling, right? And do you have any advice for young people?
Sure. Oh, that is, I love the fact that you're so intentional.
Oh, thank you.
Intentional from the point of view, through your work, you understand what's needed, what you can do to pour into the world. Like this book, it is so necessary. I haven't found a book that would teach me anything of that sort. I hear people talking, but nobody's actually, not that I'm aware of, focused to be able to use your lessons to help somebody else find direction quicker in life. I mean, mine has just been by trial and error. Every time you fell, you just picked yourself up and moved on.
No, you're very successful, and maybe you need to write that book too, Charmaine.
No,
and Ed as well. I believe we all have a book within us, and I'm a biography writer. I think that's my next thing. I've always wanted to have a biography writing business. So if you ever need anyone, but you're an amazing communicator, both of you. But if you ever need anyone who needs one. Sorry?
Charmaine, we're getting that book out for you.
Yeah.
No ways. But it's a conversation. I love the fact that you are intentional. You do stuff. And even with maths, I mean, all of the projects they all come together in a way that is very, very impactful that you guys do.
Oh, thank you.
So you are, in my view, a blessing to the world. And I need to
Oh,
ask you a question. In your
sure.
early days, you did not write a book under your name. What were you fearful of?
Hmm. Oh yes, yes. No. So actually, my first book was a biography of a Chinese Canadian pastor pioneer in
Mhm.
Canada. He was considered the father of Chinese churches in Vancouver. So I wrote his biography, and then I had a dream then that I would have a biography writing business, and it wasn't. That was 2002, and it wasn't until 2022, 20 years later, that I kind of launched my biography writing thing with this amazing therapist lady, Allison, and hopefully you'll speak with her again. But my second book, Silence No More: Voices of Comfort Women, I was writing under a pen name to protect myself from the Japanese right wing, and they are like the neo-Nazis of Japan. And there have been cases, famous cases, of when they went after a Japanese journalist, Takamura, I think his name is. They basically trolled his teenage daughter, and they were trying to convince her to kill herself because he was the first to write about Japanese wartime sex slavery for a Japanese newspaper, and they harassed him to the point where he was going to work at a new job at a university in Tokyo. I think it was in Tokyo, and they threatened that university and said, if you hire him, no, they made these threats. So they didn't hire him after all, and he worked at, I think, another college. But he's someone who I think, wow, he deserves recognition, and I haven't gone through that kind of persecution, and I won't, because I feel like I'm very balanced, as in I'm not hateful, in my tone, although, I can be upset and angry, at the fact
We all
that
can.
no
Yeah.
apology has come forth. But I've had this anti, anti-racism campaign towards the Japanese, like saying, release your hatred, and let's forgive. So that's why I wrote under a pen name, because
Okay.
of those that cohort of people who are really in the minority now, and I've hope in the next generation in Japan. The young people are very open, and so let's just hope that change will happen with these young people who get into power and in office, and start leading education systems and whatnot. So
It
yeah,
is.
I'm
It
hopeful.
is through work like yours, actually, that they would probably want to be able to utilize that to move forward in a way. Because, as you said, you take a very balanced approach. There's no hate. It's just the facts. Accept it for what it is. Take accountability, and let's move forward. I like when you say we need to heal and just move forward. I mean, the whole. I mean,
Whole world.
us as individuals, communities, nations, countries, the world needs healing. With that
Yeah,
love, kindness, and healing, we'd be able to release that heaviness we feel actually at times. So yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, why are they so threatened by these elderly Asian women? What makes them such a threat? And I mean, I thought of this might open up a can of worms, and we don't have time for it. But like, what makes the police so afraid of a little African American boy? An unarmed like, what's the threat there, right? And are there historical generational forces at play? Because it just
Definitely.
doesn't make sense. And
Yeah.
I mourn for the innocent. And so and when I did speak about Japanese wartime sex slavery in Macon, Georgia, I had both white people and African American people come up to me, because I was talking about how some of the Chinese overturned Japanese cars, and graffitied and arson and all that. And in Korea, some people lit themselves on fire because, of the fact that the Japanese government wasn't apologizing, and they were, even going to Yasukuni Shrine, which has the souls of these Class A war criminals from the Japanese military enshrined, and they're being worshipped, including some of the past recent prime ministers of Japan would worship these people who were in charge of like Japanese war crimes and sex slavery and all that. And anyways, so to hear them say, wow, you just shared a parable about race relations in America.
Yep.
And they didn't know. They thought, oh, Asians were all nice and obedient. And then, I'm showing them these images of like, down with Japan. These Chinese people are like, ah! And but they were like, whoa. But that's my role. I'm a bridge, and I want to just share the stories. But at the same time, this is an issue. But I have been shifting more to modern day sex trafficking, and I make the case that because wartime historical sex trafficking wasn't dealt with and didn't have closure, that's why we're seeing the cycle go on and on and on, right?
That is so powerful, though, and that's my point. You're quite intentional as to how you map out your journey to be able to have that end desired outcome, which is no to slavery, no to unkindness, no to cruelty.
And yes to love. And both of you are just so easy to speak with. You're both super intelligent, super kind. And I just felt it was very easy to just share. So thank you for inviting me on the show.
No, thank you so much. You are just incredible. Love your stories. Love your journey, actually. Love the fact that you are the voice for the voiceless in so many ways. So lots of love and blessings to you. Thank you.
Thank you for the amazing work. I just have one last question.
Yes.
No.
Yeah. This is an easy one for her. We asked you a question on a questionnaire prior to joining the show, and this is for me. I asked you, what was your most meaningful life event?
Oh yes.
Can you share that a little bit as our closing
Sure.
today?
Yeah. No. So when I was 4 or 5, I must have. I think I made a decision to follow Jesus, and I'm a committed Christian. And so that decision that I made as a child has stayed with me. And then I recommitted, in high school. And then I think I recommitted again at 19. And because it's not easy to follow, to walk the narrow road, right? When, there's so many fun things that you can do. And I was a party girl at one point. I love dancing and
hip hop dancing. Yep.
Yeah, I'm a hip hopper, and I'd say the most meaningful part of who I am is my Christian spirituality, and I pray, and Matt and I pray, and it's central to who we are. We're very active in our church home group, and we love God, and we believe God loves us and he loves people. And so that's, I think that's what keeps us grounded. I think it keeps us down to earth, right? Yeah. So our faith is who we are.
Fantastic.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, thank you for the work that you're doing. You're living out, your Christianity by serving the less fortunate. For those that don't read the Christian Bible, there's a section in there that says true religion is to take care of the widows and the orphans.
Yes.
And you're taking care of widows, you're taking care of orphans. So one Christian to another, thank you for that. And then just the work that you're doing, because it's thankless work sometimes. But you're serving a higher purpose, and that's helping people. And if we all could just help one person, this world will be a much better place.
Indeed,
Yes.
indeed. So
Yes.
beautifully said. Both
Go
of
ahead,
you.
Charmaine. You
Yeah.
say something. I saw you. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say to both of you, thank you for being the light and the inspiration, because it's conversations like these that help people in a way heal, actually. And like that seed, I can be something, I can do something, I can make a difference. So much love and light to everybody out there. And thank you, Sylvia. I know how busy you are. Grateful for your time, the energy, and the work that you do.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Thank you,
Lots
Have a
of
everybody.
love
nice
to you
everyone.
both and to
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank
All right.
Bye
you.
now. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.